Good morning. It's my pleasure to participate in a meeting of Community of Practice on Democratic Resilience. My name is Igor Blažević and I'm a senior advisor at the Prague Civil Society Center. The topic of our session is, do we need a new theory of change for a new world? And let me give immediately the simple and clear answer: yes, absolutely, we do need it. Before I share some of my reflections and insights, let me just briefly explain where my perspective comes from. I'm a practitioner. I'm a democracy activist for more than 30 years. From the besieged Sarajevo to several other countries, and now closely involved in resistance against the military junta in Myanmar. Parallel to that, through my work in the Prague Civil Society Center, I'm in a close connection with activists on the front lines of defending democracies or struggling to break through authoritarian rules, primarily across the Eastern Europe, Russia, Caucasus, and Central Asia. For several years now, I have been challenging myself and others within these movements with what I call our civil society's uncomfortable truths. Many of us in civil society are still operating with tactics and thinking rooted in the 90s, but the world has changed profoundly and many of our strategies do not work anymore. We now operate in a far more complex and hostile environment shaped by a resurgence of authoritarianism and weakening of the global democratic support. Rapid technological and economic changes do not longer favor democracy, freedom, and stable middle class. An emerging alliance of autocrats, kleptocrats, religious political fundamentalists, and far-right populists have an advantage in this moment. What worked before does not work anymore. Instead of continuing to be in a constant state of either urgency or busyness with projects and reports, we need to pause, we need to reflect and seriously rethink and reinvent what we do, why, and how. Before offering some suggestions for a reinvented theory of change, I want to highlight an important distinction. Context do matters. Our democracy support and civic activism strategies must differ depending on where we are. Are we in a democracies which are in a deep trouble, but where space and resources still exist, like for example US, or in Europe, Poland, Slovakia, even Hungary? Or we are in a very fragile and weak democracy or even hybrid regime, which are under heavy asymmetric attack by subversive, interfering, big authoritarian power, and just to mention the example of Moldova. Or we are in a places where democratic struggle has already been temporarily lost and where the geopolitical climate is very unfavorable. And I can think about Central Asia, Belarus, Azerbaijan, where patience and gradually developing of infrastructure and capacity for future are essential. Now, let me briefly outline what no longer works in the civil society activism. We still rely a lot on international advocacy with the democratic West and international institutions, but we ignore how geopolitics has changed, that international institutions simply don't work anymore, and that the West has significantly shrunk and changed its priorities. We are ignoring the reality that in the last 10 years, numerous mass-scale, well-organized, creative, impressive, and inspiring protest movements have been either suppressed, crushed, and defeated, or they have been twisted to achieve the goals of the other group, not the liberal, progressivist, or democratic one. There are lessons there which we need to learn, and we are not learning. We are systematically developing dependency instead of building power. Dependency on donors, on policymakers, often distant ones in international institutions or in the INGO community or on social media platforms, Instead of rooting ourselves in the concrete social economic groups within our own societies. We are in an elitist civil society game. We are urban, educated, professionalized, cosmopolitan, and in a very profound way disconnected from our own society. We claim to be a civil society, but we are not part of a society. We have accepted a self-imposed apolitical approach. We do not aspire to gain power. We just want to check, advise, and correct power. We are, as one author said, revolutions without revolutionaries. We have locked ourselves in compartments that prevent us from forming broader societal alliances. We do aid only, or we provide services only. We do monitoring or advocacy only. We protest only. So always only, never together. We have atomized ourselves in my issue approach instead of developing the capacity for collective nationwide actions, locking ourselves in the exclusivism of our own isms. We are operating in the absence of strategy. We are stuck in endless annual circles of being busy with projects instead of pursuing strategic development of resources, capacity, and power to achieve real goals. So what are some elements of the new theory of the change? Let me start. Do not start with the question, what is my issue and how do I mobilize people for my issue? Instead of that, start with the question, who are my people? The social economic groups I need to organize to achieve transformative change and to sustain and consolidate that change. Do not look on foreign donors and outside actors to bring change in your country. Organize grassroots power in your own society. Abandon short-termism and one-year project circle. Work with the assumption that change takes time. Think and strategize in 5-10 years circles. Follow your own agenda, not the agenda of the fat cats, contractors, NGOs, and clientelistic intermediaries between the big donors and activists. To confront the kind of the regime we are up against today, which means entrenched, confident, resourceful, skillful, and very brutal, we must move beyond the ideology of spontaneity, horizontality, and leaderlessness. These concepts, while well-intended, are strategically dangerous. In the face of the serious authoritarian resistance, they become deadly weaknesses. We need leaderful movement, backbone organization capable of the strategic planning and pivots, and we need team of teams. Hard, prolonged struggles for transformative change need leadership, not just rapidly mobilize disorganized big numbers. If we want change to succeed and endure, we also need political alternatives. Change requires more than civil society. It needs credible political actors who can inspire and mobilize people around a democratic vision. If we want to bring change that is real and lasting, we must abandon the anti-politics and anti-power mindset that still prevails in many activist circles. This attitude is a self-inflicted fatal wound. Don't waste time and energy on debunking or fact-checking disinformation. Understand that we are in a battle of narratives, in a landscape of information and psychological warfare. Reject my issue activism. Understand the strategic necessity of cooperation. Common ground is not created at NGO forums, but by showing up for others in what matters to them, by participating in their efforts and struggles. Systematically cultivate the togetherness, and that means practice. So go to the gym of the togetherness to gain the muscles before the tough battles start. Understand the limitation of exile. Yes, you can find safety and after some time a comfortable life in exile, but you risk making yourself irrelevant. Learn from liberation movement that survive for decades, partly underground, partly above ground through proxies, partly in a parallel process policies, and yes, partly in authoritarian jails. Don't fight for reversal. Come back to what it has been. Instead, articulate the vision of a new promised land, because if we want people to follow us through decades of hardship, on a long march through the desert, and exodus from slavery, we need a positive narrative of hope and promise. Ask the hard question and explore possibilities. Where is the new majority? In the developed world, we are polarized in a 50-50%. In less democratic, less socially economically developed society, where more people are in a rural economy, in unstable jobs in city periphery, with limited opportunity, poorer or no education, more religiosity and less secularism, we are often 20-30% versus 70-80%. Now, in society after society, deep divisions have formed along the lines of the cultural wars. Polarization undermines the social base of democracy, and we need to understand that. That is why we must ask ourselves, are we mobilizing around the right issues? Or are these very issues being successfully weaponized by anti-democratic forces to divide, polarize, and conquer? Somebody needs to hold the ground, no question about that. But somebody else needs to work on strategic broader alliances, which means also working and struggling together with those who have a different values than us. So important question is, what are the issues around which new majorities are formed? Issues that bridge divides of the cultural wars. These are just a few reflections and few insights, and I'm very much looking forward for our further discussion. Thank you.